I didn't know the first day would end with me walking backward down an exit ramp, watching a skyline I couldn't go back to. My name is Mason. Before all this, I was a maintenance planner for a regional freight carrier out of northern New Jersey. Paperwork, schedules, parts lists, not hero stuff. I knew how to keep diesel engines alive, how to track fuel burn, how to fix things when the supply chain hiccuped. I knew how to read a map and how to avoid getting lost on the interstates at night. That is about all. The outbreak turned those skills into a reason people didn't leave me behind. It started like every other big story. A clip, a headline, a shaky video, then a statement that tried to sound calm. People argued about what it was, whether it was real, whether it was overblown. By the time the words public safety and temporary restrictions hit the screen, the gas stations were already out of regular and running on whatever was left in the underground tanks. The lines at pharmacies wrapped around strip malls. Stores put up handwritten signs that had got ripped down by someone angry enough to not care. I was in Kearney the morning my phone quit being useful, standing under the dull hum of fluorescent lights in our shop's parts cage, trying to figure out why a shipment of alternators was delayed. I had a work radio squawking with drivers complaining about road closures around Newark. Nothing new. That whole area was always a puzzle of detours. Then, the first driver came in and said he'd watched a person stumble into traffic on the Pulaski Skyway approach like they were blind. Another driver said the same thing happened near Harrison. A third said a guy tried to climb onto his trailer at a red light. We all laughed in that tense way people do when they don't want to admit something is wrong. By lunch, the Port Authority police were pushing traffic off certain routes. By mid-afternoon, the shop manager told everyone to head home early. By evening, my sister in Pennsylvania called and said the emergency alert system tone had gone off twice, and their county was telling people to shelter in place. That night, from my apartment window, I watched the turnpike glow with brake lights in both directions like a river of red. No one was going anywhere fast. I slept in jeans with my keys in my pocket because the air outside sounded like sirens and distant shouting and the occasional crack of something that could have been fireworks. The next morning, my building's hallway smelled like someone had spilled bleach and left it there. I didn't go to work. Work wasn't a real concept anymore. I went to my storage closet, pulled out a duffel bag, and started stuffing it like I was packing for a trip I couldn't cancel. Water bottles, a cheap filter straw I'd bought for camping and never used, a headlamp, extra socks, a basic first aid kit, a compact tool roll, adjustable wrench, pliers, screwdriver, a utility knife, duct tape, the small stuff that turns I can't into maybe. I owned a pistol because my dad had insisted when I moved out on my own. A 9mm, nothing fancy. I'd taken a basic range class. I had 2 magazines and 1 box of ammunition in a lockbox. I didn't feel braver holding it. I felt like I'd just accepted that life had become something else. On the kitchen table, I laid out a paper road atlas I'd kept in my car. It felt old-fashioned, but the cell network was already choking. A paper map didn't care if towers were down. My phone buzzed once, then twice, then died in my hand. No service, no data, just a black screen and my reflection looking back at me. That was the moment I decided to leave. Not because I thought I'd be safer on the road, because staying meant waiting for whatever was building to reach my door. And I've never been good at waiting. I had one destination, my uncle's place outside Reading, Pennsylvania. He wasn't a doomsday guy, but He had land, and a barn, and a generator, and, most importantly, he lived far enough from the densest population that maybe we'd have a little time. My sister lived not far from him. If I could get there, we could link up. The problem was getting out of northern New Jersey. I went down to the parking lot and found my truck still where I'd left it, an older Ford F-150 with a V8 and a bed full of odds and ends from work. It wasn't new, but it ran. I'd kept it maintained because that was what I did. The battery was strong, tires were decent, fluids topped off. I had half a tank. Half a tank might as well have been gold. I drove with the radio on, scanning for anything. Most stations were dead air or looping emergency messages. A few were talk radio hosts trying to keep their voice steady. They used words like incidents and unknown cause and avoid contact. They never said the word everyone was thinking. I did my best to avoid the main arteries. The New Jersey Turnpike was jammed. The Garden State Parkway looked like a parking lot from the overpasses, so I took surface roads west, weaving through industrial streets and residential neighborhoods where people stood on porches watching the world shift. I passed an intersection where a city bus sat abandoned with its doors open. No driver, no passengers, just a faint smell of hot brakes and something sour. That was the first time I saw them up close. A woman in a gray hoodie wandered in the middle of the road like she didn't understand lanes. Her head twitched as if she was listening to something inside her skull. She turned toward my truck as I rolled by and pressed her palms against the side panel, leaving streaks of dirt. Her eyes were open, but there wasn't a person behind them. I didn't stop. I didn't lean out the window. I didn't ask if she needed help. I kept driving, hands locked on the steering wheel so hard my fingers hurt. By the time I hit Interstate 78 West, the traffic thinned. That should have been good news. It wasn't. It meant people either couldn't leave or had already left and something had shut the door behind them. West of Newark, the landscape starts to roll. Trees and hills. It's not wilderness, but it's not concrete. That morning, the highway felt like a border between the old life and the new. At a rest area near Clinton, I saw the first group of survivors that would become my people. There were 5 of them at first, standing around a sedan with its trunk open. They'd parked near the far end, away from the building. One of them waved me down with both hands like a traffic cop. Another held something long that I recognized as a hunting rifle. I should have kept going. I didn't. I still believed in people, I guess. Or maybe I knew that alone wasn't a plan. I pulled into the lot, angled my truck so I could drive out fast if I needed to, and stepped out with my hands visible. The man with the rifle didn't point it at me, but he held it ready. He was in his 40s maybe, with a ball cap and a beard that looked like it had grown in a hurry. The woman waving was younger, maybe late 20s, hair tied back, face smudged like she'd been crawling under something. "Are you headed west?" she asked. "Pennsylvania," I said. "Reading area." She nodded like that meant something. "We're trying to get across. You got extra gas?" I shook my head. "Half a tank, that's it." The bearded man looked me over, then my truck. "You got tools?" I hesitated, then nodded. Basic set. That changed his posture. He lowered the rifle a fraction. "We've got a problem," he said, jerking his chin toward the sedan. "Battery's dead. We can't get a jump. We've been trying." The woman added, "There's something wrong with the cables. They're frayed. Sparks." I walked closer. keeping my eyes moving. The rest area building was quiet. Too quiet. A few cars sat abandoned with doors open. A shopping cart was tipped on its side like someone had run. I popped my truck's hood and pulled out my jumper cables, the heavy-duty set I kept for work. I took one look at theirs and understood. Cheap, thin metal clamps, insulation peeled back, copper exposed. They'd probably shorted and heated up. "Unplug yours," I said, and I used mine. Clean connection. Positive to positive, negative to a solid ground on their engine block. I didn't connect negative directly to the battery terminal because if their battery was leaking or venting, a spark there is the last thing you want. That wasn't apocalypse knowledge. That was basic safety. We waited. I let my truck idle, watched my temperature gauge, listened to the engine. After a minute, the sedan started. The woman exhaled like she'd been holding her breath all day. "Thank you." The bearded man finally introduced himself. "I'm Hank Dobbins." The woman said, "Lena Cho." She pointed to the others, a tall black guy with a backpack and an anxious look named Reggie Mercer. "Paramedic," he said. A stocky older woman with gray hair and a stern face named Donna Fields, retired corrections officer. And a quiet kid, maybe 19, named Tyler, who didn't speak unless someone asked him something directly. They'd been trying to reach Allentown. Their plan was vague beyond that. Avoid cities, find family, stay alive. Mine wasn't much better. We stood there in the cold morning air, and I felt the shift happen. 5 strangers became we because the world had made I too small. "We should move together," Reggie said. His voice was calm, but his eyes kept flicking toward the tree line behind the rest area. "If something happens, we've got a better chance." Donna crossed her arms. "And if one of you turns out to be trouble, we're dragging trouble with us." Hank looked at me. "You got a gun?" I didn't want to answer, but lying would get me killed faster than truth. "Yes," I said. He nodded. "We've got a couple. We're not looking to start anything. Just, just survive." We agreed without shaking hands. No one wanted that contact. We just looked at each other and understood the new rules. Distance, awareness, no surprises. We rolled out in a convoy, my truck in front, sedan behind. We kept 2 car lengths at least. Enough room to brake. Enough room to maneuver. For a while it worked. Interstate 78 carried us into Pennsylvania. The first thing I noticed was the lack of normal traffic enforcement. No state troopers. No flashing lights. Just signs that warned of construction. Speed limits that no one cared about anymore. And the occasional abandoned vehicle. Near the border, we passed a line of cars stopped haphazardly on the shoulder. Some had hazard lights blinking until their batteries died. People were gone. Not a good sign. We didn't stop. The first real trouble came near Lehigh Valley. You can see the change as you approach. More ramps, more billboards, warehouses, shopping centers. Civilization, which had always meant convenience, suddenly meant density. Density meant risk. We took an exit to avoid a backup on the main highway, planning to cut around on local roads. That decision put us into a commercial corridor with strip malls and big box stores. It also put us into an area where people had panicked and then stopped panicking because there was nothing left to hold on to. I saw them before the others did. A cluster of figures near an intersection, moving slowly, turning their heads in unison like they'd heard something. I keyed my handheld radio, one of the cheap two-way units Hank had. "Heads up," I said. "Group near the light. We're not stopping." Hank's voice crackled back. "Copy." I kept my speed steady. No sudden acceleration, no squealing tires. Noise draws attention. If you can slip past without making a scene, do it. But Tyler in the sedan behind us must have seen something different. Maybe fear took his hands. Maybe he thought stopping was safer. The sedan's brake lights flared. Hank swore over the radio. The sedan slowed too much. The figures turned. One stepped into the road, arms out, almost like it was asking to be picked up. Another shuffled toward the sidewalk, bumping into a trash can that clattered. The sound echoed against storefront glass. More heads turned. I had to make a choice in seconds. If I kept going, the sedan might get surrounded. If I stopped, my truck could get boxed in. Either way, we could lose everything. I hit my brakes, but not to a full stop. I rolled to a crawl, angled my truck to block one lane, and give the sedan room to swing wide. I leaned out the window, shouting without words, just a harsh, "Go! Go!" motioning forward. Hank understood. The sedan surged, tires chirping, sliding around my front bumper and pushing through the intersection. The figures moved faster than they should have, not sprinting, but with a sudden urgency, like a switch flipped. They reached for the sedan's trunk, the rear door handles. Their fingers scraped paint. The sound made my stomach twist. Donna fired a shot from the sedan's passenger window, not at a person's head like you see in movies. She fired into the pavement near them, a warning meant to scare. The crack of it punched the air and shattered the quiet. It did scare them. It also drew more. From between parked cars, from the shadowed doorway of a nail salon, from behind a dumpster, more of them emerged. At least 24, maybe more, converging on the noise. Donna yelled something, but I couldn't hear through the closed windows and the rising chaos. Hank kept the sedan moving, pushing through. I stomped the accelerator and followed. We got out of that corridor by force and luck. We didn't hit anyone. We didn't run them down. We just shoved air and noise and fear through the space and escaped. When we finally pulled onto a quieter two-lane road, lined with bare winter trees, my hands were shaking so hard I had to grip the wheel tighter to keep the truck straight. We stopped at a small pull-off near an old farm gate, far from buildings. No one spoke for a full minute. The silence was louder than the gunshot. Reggie got out first, scanning the tree line, then the road behind us. Hank stepped out next, face pale. Donna's jaw was locked like steel. Lena came to my window. "That was close," she said, voice flat. "Yeah," I replied. My throat felt dry. "Too close." Tyler climbed out of the sedan, eyes wide, breathing fast like he might pass out. I thought if we slowed down, I don't know." "No," Donna snapped. "You don't slow down. You don't stop. Not in a crowd." Tyler flinched. Hank put a hand on his shoulder. Not gentle, but grounding. "You did what you did," Hank said. "Now you learn." We learned a lot over the next few hours. We learned that rural didn't mean empty. We passed small towns where smoke rose from a few chimneys and not from others. We saw people barricading storefronts with plywood, and we saw other places already broken into, doors hanging open. We learned that the infected, or whatever you wanted to call them, didn't always cluster in cities. They followed roads. They wandered. They were drawn to sound and movement. They were unpredictable in the way that made planning feel like guessing. We learned fuel was the clock. By late afternoon, my gauge dropped under a quarter tank. The sedan's was worse. Hank admitted they'd been low when they left their apartment in Elizabeth. They'd gambled on finding gas along the way. We passed 3 gas stations with handwritten "out" signs taped to the pumps. At the 4th, a line of abandoned cars blocked the entrance. At the 5th, we found a station that still had fuel, but it also had people with guns standing guard. A small group had set up a perimeter using their trucks. They'd parked to block the driveway and left only a narrow gap. A man in a high-visibility vest held a shotgun across his chest like a badge. I rolled my truck forward slowly and stopped well short of their barricade. I didn't get out right away. I didn't want to make them nervous. The man in the vest walked forward. "What do you want?" he called. "Fuel," I said through my open window. "We'll pay." He laughed once, not friendly. "Pay with what?" I glanced at Hank behind me, then back. "Cash, supplies, tools." That word again, tools. The man's eyes flicked to my truck bed, where a red toolbox was visible. He made a decision. "You got a siphon hose?" I did, a short, clear hose I used for draining tanks. "Yes." He nodded slowly. "We can trade, but here's the deal. You don't come onto the lot, you don't get near our people. You give the hose, we fill your cans, you leave." I didn't love it, but I loved running out of gas less. "We've got cans," I said. We did. 2 5-gallon cans in my truck and 1 in the sedan. Empty, but usable. I grabbed them and walked forward carefully with my hands visible. Hank and Donna stayed by the vehicles, watching. The man in the vest had 2 others with him, both armed. Their eyes tracked every move I made. I set the cans down, laid the hose next to them, and backed away. He called. "What you offering?" I opened my toolbox and pulled out things that mattered now. A new serpentine belt, still in packaging. A pack of heavy-duty zip ties. A sealed roll of electrical tape, and 2 bottles of engine oil. Supplies that could keep vehicles running. Running vehicles meant power and movement. Movement meant survival. He weighed it in his mind. That's not enough. I swallowed. I didn't want to give up ammunition. I didn't want to give up my filter, but fuel was the clock. I added a small jump pack battery, one of the compact ones that can start a car and charge phones. I'd charged it the night before. His eyes lit up. "Now we're talking." We backed off, and they handled the fueling. I watched them pump from an underground tank using a hand crank they'd rigged. They moved like people who'd been doing it all day, efficient, guarded. They filled our cans, then slid them back toward us like we were trading across a river. We loaded up and left without lingering. We didn't talk much for the next hour, just drove. The sun dropped behind hills, and the temperature fell with it. The winter sky went from pale to deep blue to black. Without city glow, the dark felt heavier. Near the outskirts of Reading, we hit our first real wall. The highway ahead was blocked, not just a few stalled cars. A full barricade with concrete barriers and trucks turned sideways. A makeshift checkpoint sign read, "No entry. County Emergency Control." It looked official at first glance. There were flashers, there were reflective cones, but there were no uniformed officers. Just men with rifles and headlamps, faces hidden under hoodies. Hank pulled up behind me, and I could feel his anxiety through the radio silence. I slowed and stopped a safe distance away. I didn't like the look of it. Too quiet. Too improvised. Too opportunistic. One of the armed men stepped out, waving his light at us like he was herding animals. "Turn around," he shouted. "Road's closed." I called back, "We're trying to get to Reddin." He laughed. "Not tonight, you're not." Donna's voice came through the radio, low and tight. "Those aren't cops." "No," Hank agreed. "There's something else." A second man appeared, carrying a metal jerry can. He shook it like a salesman. "You got fuel? You pay toll." That settled it. This wasn't an emergency checkpoint. This was a trap. I put my truck in reverse slowly, turning my wheels to angle away. The man with the light stepped forward, raising his rifle. "Hey," he yelled. "Where you going?" "Turning around," I replied, voice steady. I didn't floor it, not yet. If I spooked them, they might shoot. The man took 2 steps forward, then hesitated. Maybe he didn't want to fire. Maybe he didn't want the noise. Maybe he didn't want the consequences. I reversed enough to swing, then shifted into drive and rolled away, accelerating only once the barricade was behind a curve. Hank followed. We didn't speak until the checkpoint was out of sight. Then Reggie said quietly over the radio, "They're controlling routes." Donna replied, "People always control routes. That's how you control everything else." We pulled onto smaller roads, aiming for my uncle's property. But the closer we got, the more we saw evidence that things were already spilling outward. A farmhouse with its porch light blinking, door hanging open. A pickup in a ditch with its driver's side door flung wide. A dog running loose, ribs visible, barking at us in the headlights. It wasn't just the infected. It was people. Fear, hunger, control, the whole package. We reached my uncle's road after midnight. His place was a small spread of land outside a cluster of houses with a barn set back from the road. I'd been there a dozen times for barbecues and holidays. I knew the curve in the driveway. I knew the old mailbox. The mailbox was knocked over. My stomach sank. I cut my headlights before turning in, rolling slow with the engine barely above idle. Hank did the same. Darkness became our camouflage. We stopped short of the house and listened. No generator hum, no porch light, no movement. I stepped out, handgun held low, finger off the trigger. The cold hit my face like a slap. The air smelled like damp earth and wood smoke, faint but present. Hank came up beside me. Donna and Reggie moved with us. Lena stayed near the vehicles with Tyler, watching our rear. We approached the house from the side, keeping to shadows. I remembered my uncle's habits. He always locked the doors, always checked windows. He was cautious. He'd taught me to be. The back door was open an inch. Donna leaned in, listening. Then she pushed it gently. Inside, the house was dark. The air was stale. I could hear the faint drip of water somewhere, maybe a sink left running. Reggie whispered, "Mason, you sure this is the right place?" "Yes," I whispered back. "I know this house." We moved room to room slowly. No one in the kitchen. No one in the living room. The furniture was overturned like someone had shoved it aside quickly. A cabinet drawer hung open. A chair lay on its side. Upstairs, the bedroom doors were open, beds unmade. A closet door swung slightly, squeaking. No bodies. No obvious signs of the worst. Just absence and haste. In the hallway, Hank pointed to the wall phone. The cord was ripped out. Someone had yanked it hard. Donna found something else. A note on the kitchen counter, written in thick marker on the back of a utility bill. Went to the barn, staying quiet. If you're here, don't use lights. J. my uncle's initial. Relief hit me so fast I almost laughed, but it caught in my throat. We moved back outside and headed toward the barn. Halfway there, Lena hissed into the radio, "Movement on the road." I froze. Hank froze. Donna dropped to a knee, peering. Headlights, distant and low, creeping along like someone trying not to be seen. Not infected. Vehicles. I felt the plan snap into place without words. We were exposed out here. The barn was our cover, our shelter, our fallback. "Move," Donna whispered. We hustled the last stretch to the barn, keeping low. The barn door was shut, but not latched. I pulled it open just enough to slip through. The smell of hay and oil and old wood wrapped around us. Inside, a small lantern glowed under a tarp-covered workbench. A figure rose from behind a stack of feed bags. "Mason," a voice called, shaky. "Uncle Jim," I breathed. He stepped into the lantern light. He looked older than the last time I'd seen him, like the past 2 days had stolen a decade. His hands were stained with grease. His eyes were sharp. He saw Hank and the others and raised his shotgun until I shook my head. "They're with me," I said. They helped. Jim lowered the shotgun, but didn't relax. "You picked a bad time to visit." "Yeah," I said. "We saw a checkpoint. Not real." Jim nodded grimly. "There are a couple. People figured out roads matter. They're not letting anyone into town. Not unless you're useful." "Is Redding?" Hank asked. Jim looked away. "It's a mess. The hospital's overwhelmed. The sheriff's department tried to set a perimeter, but they don't have the manpower. Too many calls, too many incidents. Folks panicked. Some left, some didn't. The ones that got sick, they're not themselves." He said it without using the word, like saying it might make it more true. Donna asked, "You alone here?" Jim hesitated. "My neighbor and his wife were with me. They left yesterday morning. Said they had family in Lancaster. Haven't seen them since." Reggie asked the question none of us wanted answered. "Are there any around here?" Jim nodded toward the barn's far end where the big doors face the field. A few wandered through, mostly drawn by noise. I've been quiet, keeping the generator off unless I absolutely need it. He looked at me. "You got fuel?" I nodded. "Some, not a lot." Jim exhaled. "Good, we can work with that." We weren't safe, but we had walls and a roof and a man who knew the land. That was something. We settled in the barn that night, stacked hay bales against cracks in the doors to block light, and set up a simple watch rotation. Donna insisted on it, and she was right. We didn't all sleep at once anymore. I took first watch with Hank. We sat on overturned buckets near a side window, peering out through a gap in the boards. "Those headlights," Hank whispered. "You think they were the checkpoint guys?" "Maybe," I said. "Or someone else. People are moving." Hank rubbed his face. "You notice how every time we find something that looks like order, it's just not?" "Order's expensive," I replied. "It takes fuel, it takes communication, it takes people who show up when it's hard. Most of that broke first." He nodded slowly. "So, what now?" I didn't have an answer. I had a direction. Survive tonight, then tomorrow, then figure out the next move. The next move came sooner than I wanted. Just before dawn, the sound of engines approached. Not 1, 2, maybe 3. Slow, controlled, not panicked. Vehicles rolling like they owned the road. Jim came awake instantly, shotgun in hand, as if he'd never been fully asleep. Donna peered through a crack and swore under her breath. Pickup trucks, At least 2. They've got lights, but they're covered. Hank asked, "How'd they find you?" Jim's face went hard. "Smoke. I burned a little trash last night. Thought it was small enough. Maybe it wasn't." Reggie whispered, "Or they're just sweeping properties." Lena's voice was tight. "They're stopping at the house." My uncle's house, empty and dark, but still a landmark. We stayed silent as the trucks idled. Footsteps crunched gravel. A flashlight beam swept across the yard like a searchlight. A voice called out, "Anybody home?" No response. Another voice, "Check the barn." My pulse spiked. They were coming straight here. Jim motioned us deeper into the barn behind stacked equipment. He whispered, "No one fires unless they breach. Noise will bring the others." The others meant the infected. But in that moment, the immediate threat was human. The barn door rattled as someone tested it, then again, harder. "Locked," someone said. "It's not locked," Donna murmured. "It's just latched." A crowbar scraped metal. The sound was sharp, ugly, loud in the quiet morning. Jim muttered, "They're going to pop it." I scanned the barn for options. A side door, a loft ladder, a rear exit through the big doors that led to the field. Escape routes, fallback routes. There it was again. Fall back. Forced to. Hank whispered, "We can't hold this." Donna shook her head. "Not without lighting up the whole county." Reggie added, "And if we shoot, we start a fight we can't finish." Jim made a decision. He pointed toward the rear doors. Out the back, into the field. Tree line, there's a creek bed. We can follow it to the old drainage culvert under the county road. We can hide there until they leave. Tyler's face went pale. "A culvert?" Jim snapped. "You got a better idea?" We moved quickly, silently, in a line. I carried my duffel and my pistol. Hank carried a small pack and his rifle. Donna had her handgun. Reggie had his medical kit strapped tight. Lena had a small backpack and a crowbar she'd picked up from the barn wall. At the rear doors, Jim cracked them open just enough to slip out. The field was frozen crust over dirt. Our boots made soft crunches. The air burned my lungs. The sky was a thin gray. Behind us, the barn door finally gave with a metallic pop and a loud slam as it swung open. A voice shouted, "Barn's been used. Somebody was here." Another voice, "Search it." We ran. Not a movie sprint, not a full-on panic stampede. Controlled, as fast as you can move without falling, without making too much noise, without leaving a trail that screams where you went. But we were leaving a trail anyway. Footprints, broken frost, bending grass. We hit the tree line and dropped down into a shallow creek bed, mostly dry except for patches of ice. The banks gave us cover from the yard behind us. We followed it like a trench. Behind us, I heard someone yell again. Then I heard something else. A long, distant moan that rose and fell like wind through a pipe. Donna whispered, "They're drawing attention." They were shouting, slamming doors, banging around. That kind of activity wasn't just risky. It was a beacon. And, sure enough, within minutes we heard new sounds, shuffling through the brush, the snap of branches, the irregular rhythm of feet that didn't move like people who were thinking. Reggie glanced at me, fear in his eyes. "They're coming toward the noise." "Not toward us," I said. "Toward them." But that didn't mean we were safe. If enough of them gathered, they'd spread like water, filling whatever low places they could. A creek bed is a low place. Jim led us faster. We reached the county road culvert, a concrete pipe under the road wide enough to crawl through. It smelled like wet leaves and mud and old runoff. Jim waved us inside without hesitation. We crawled in, one by one, dragging packs. The floor was slick. The air was cold and damp. The light at the far end looked like a gray coin. We tucked ourselves into a side recess where the pipe widened, pressing against the concrete wall, breathing shallow. Outside, on the road above, engines revved. Doors slammed. A truck drove off, then another. Footsteps approached the culvert entrance. A beam of light stabbed into the pipe, sweeping back and forth. It paused, then moved away. A voice said, "Nothing down here, just mud." They left. We stayed still for a long time. Only when the engines faded did we allow ourselves to move again. Jim whispered, voice bitter, "They're not just taking fuel. They're taking places. They're pushing people out." Hank stared at the damp concrete like he could see the whole situation in it. "So we've been forced to fall back." Donna nodded once. "And it won't be the last time." We emerged from the far end of the culvert into a brushy ditch on the other side of the road, away from Jim's property. We were officially displaced. The barn that had been our anchor was compromised. The house was compromised. The whole area was now a point on someone else's map. We needed a new plan, and we needed it fast. Reggie said, "There's a fire station not far from here. Volunteer station. Might have supplies." Jim shook his head. "They tried to use it as a shelter. It got overwhelmed." Lena asked, "Then where?" Jim looked at me. "You still trying to get family?" "My sister," I said. "She's closer to Redding. But if the roads are controlled," Donna cut in, "we need a place that isn't obvious. Not a house, not a store, not a station." I thought of my work life, the places I'd been that people didn't think about. "What about industrial?" Hank frowned. "Like what?" "Like a water treatment plant," I said. "Like a warehouse, somewhere with fencing and backup power, somewhere built to keep things in and out." Jim's eyes narrowed. "There's a small municipal water facility near here, not the big one in town. A pumping station and a reservoir access road. It's fenced, gates usually locked." Donna looked at him. "And you know how to get in?" Jim shrugged. "I know where the fence is weakest." Hank looked at me. "You can handle pumps and generators?" "Better than most," I said. "If it's got a diesel backup and a transfer switch, I can probably make it run." Reggie nodded. "If we can secure water, we can survive longer." So that became the new objective. Not comfort, not home, but infrastructure. We moved along back roads and through woods to avoid main routes. The day stayed gray, the kind of winter day that makes everything look drained. We crossed one small neighborhood and saw signs of a fight. Broken glass, tire tracks, scattered food wrappers. No people. That was becoming a pattern. The aftermath without the story. By afternoon, we reached the edge of the pumping station property. It sat behind a chain-link fence topped with angled barbed wire. A small brick building with a metal door, a couple of vents, and a water tower visible farther back. A gravel access road led up to a gate secured with a heavy padlock. No vehicles, no smoke, no lights. It looked empty. That didn't mean it was. We approached carefully. Donna and Hank covered the perimeter while I moved to the gate with Jim and Lena. Tyler stayed close to Reggie, trying not to breathe loud. The padlock was commercial grade. Thick shackle. Not something you cut with bolt cutters unless you had serious leverage. But Chain link gates have weak points. The latch bracket, the chain itself. Lena handed me the crowbar. "Try the bracket," she whispered. I wedged the bar and applied steady pressure, not jerking. Metal groaned. The bracket flexed. Not enough. Jim pointed to the fence line near a corner post. "There," he said. "It's loose." We moved along the fence until we found the spot. The bottom rail was pulled up slightly where water erosion had undercut the soil. A gap you could widen enough to slide under if you weren't wearing bulky gear. Donna came over, scanned, then nodded. "That's our way." We went under one at a time. Packs first, then bodies. The barbed wire above reminded us not to stand up too close. Inside, we crossed the gravel lot to the brick building. The door was locked with a standard commercial knob and a deadbolt. I checked the hinges, external but with security pins. Not easy. Then I saw a small electrical conduit entering the wall near ground level and a junction box with a service panel. In my old world, I'd never touched that without authorization. In this world, authorization was survival. I opened the junction box and traced the wiring. The panel was locked, but the lock was a simple wafer key type. I didn't have that key. But I did have a screwdriver and a willingness to do what needed doing. I didn't rip it open. I didn't want to cause damage that would make it unsafe. I used the screwdriver to remove the hinges on the lock cover, slid it off, and accessed the main breaker. The building likely had an alarm system, but if the power was off or the system was dead, it might not matter. I flipped the exterior light switch to see if anything came on. Nothing. No power. Jim muttered. Town probably killed it, or it went out. We needed inside access, and brute force would announce us. Reggie pointed to a small window near the back. That one's higher, if it's unlocked. We moved around. The window was a narrow horizontal slider, dusty. Lena reached up, tried it gently. It slid. We stared at each other. Sometimes you get lucky. Lena slid it open enough to squeeze through. She was small and athletic. She climbed in, feet first, careful not to drop. Inside, we heard her land softly. A moment later, the deadbolt clicked from the inside. The door opened. We were in. The building smelled like damp concrete and chlorine. Industrial clean. Good. We shut the door behind us, locked it again, and moved through corridors lit only by our headlamps. I found the generator room quickly because the signage was straightforward. Generator. Authorized personnel only. Inside sat a diesel generator set, likely around 100 kilowatts, housed in a sound-attenuated enclosure with an automatic transfer switch panel on the wall. The fuel tank looked partially full. A sight gauge showed maybe a third. My chest loosened. This was what I understood. I checked the oil level, coolant reservoir, belts. Everything looked intact. The battery terminals were a little corroded, but not terrible. I pulled out a wire brush from my toolkit and cleaned them anyway. "Can you start it?" Hank asked. "Not yet," I said. "First, we make sure it won't fry itself, and we need to know what loads it's feeding." I opened the transfer switch cabinet and verified it was in the off position, isolated. I checked the panel for obvious damage. I didn't smell burnt insulation, which was good. Then I went to the main distribution panel, found critical circuits labeled. Lights, control room, pump motors, chemical feed. "Here's the plan," I said quietly. "We bring up the generator with minimal load. Lights first, control room. Then we decide if we want to run pumps." Reggie nodded. Water in the system might still have pressure, but eventually it won't. Donna asked, "If we run pumps, does it advertise?" "Maybe," I admitted. "Noise, vibration, exhaust, but it's contained, and if we keep it limited, it might not be obvious." Jim said, "Better than being out in the open." I agreed. I primed the generator's fuel system using the manual pump, then turned the key. The starter engaged. The engine coughed once, then caught, settling into a steady rumble that felt like a heartbeat in the concrete room. No alarms. Oil pressure came up. Voltage stabilized. I switched the transfer switch to feed selected circuits. Lights flickered on in the hallway, a small victory that made everyone breathe easier. We moved to the control room. It was a small space with monitors, a desk, and a wall-mounted diagram of the local water system. Most of the screens were dark, but one small panel lit up showing basic status. "Pressure's low," Reggie said, reading the gauge. Jim looked at me. "Can we fill a tank without sending water into town?" I studied the diagram. There was a local reservoir and a distribution network. Depending on valve positions, you could isolate sections. "I can try," I said, "but I need time, and we need security while I do it." Donna nodded, already moving to check doors and windows. "I'll take first perimeter." Hank and Lena followed her. Reggie stayed with me, partly because he wanted to help, partly because he didn't trust leaving the technical guy alone with the only power source. We worked for an hour, quietly, methodically. I traced the valves, checked controls, and managed to isolate a small section feeding the facility itself and a nearby storage tank without pushing flow toward the wider network. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. We filled containers at a utility sink once we confirmed the water was clear and treated. Reggie insisted on running it through a filter anyway and adding a measured amount of purification tablets. He was cautious in a way that kept people alive. As evening fell, we set up a new routine inside the pumping station, sleeping in shifts, keeping lights dim, avoiding unnecessary noise. We were tired, hungry, and still shaken from being pushed out of my uncle's barn. But we had water, shelter, and a fence. We thought that meant we could finally stop falling back. We were wrong. The next morning, the first sign came as a vibration through the floor. Heavy vehicles on the access road outside the fence. Then voices, muffled but close. Hank peered through a small window and cursed softly. "It's them. Or ones like them. 2 pickups, 4 guys." Donna moved to his side, eyes narrowed. "They're checking the gate." Jim's face went gray. "How did they track us?" Lena whispered. "Footprints. We didn't cover them." Reggie added, "And they know people need infrastructure. They'll sweep places like this." Outside, a crowbar hit the gate latch. Metal rang. Donna looked at me. "Can you cut the power and make it look dead?" "Yes," I said, "but if they breach, we still have a problem." Hank asked, "Back exit?" Jim nodded. "There's a service hatch on the far side. Leads to a drainage channel. We can slip out and circle." Donna's jaw set. So we fall back again. The gate rattled harder. Someone shouted, "You hear that? There's power in there." My stomach dropped. The generator exhaust. The lights. Something had given us away. I moved fast, flipping breakers, shutting down non-essential circuits, leaving the building as dark as possible. I shut the generator down and let the silence settle like dust. Outside, the men didn't stop. They were committed now. They wanted what this place offered. We gathered our gear in seconds. No arguing, no debate. The new rule was simple. You don't hold ground unless you can actually hold it. Not hope, hold it. Real, hold it. We slipped through the service hatch into a narrow drainage channel that ran behind the facility, concrete-lined and partially iced. It led away from the fence into brush and trees. As we moved, we heard the gate finally give. A shout of triumph. Then, faintly, the slam of the facility door. Donna whispered, "They're inside." Hank whispered back, "Let them have it." It felt like swallowing glass, leaving water and shelter behind. But we did it because staying would mean a firefight, and a firefight would mean noise, and noise would mean a swarm of infected drawn to the only loud thing in miles. We moved through the drainage channel, then into the woods. Jim led us toward an old railroad spur he said ran behind a ridge and connected to a service road. The plan was to reach a place with options, somewhere we could move again without getting pinned. We walked for hours. The cold worked into our joints. Tyler lagged, exhausted, but Reggie kept him moving with quiet encouragement. Lena scouted ahead with the crowbar in hand like it was part of her arm. Hank watched our rear constantly. Donna moved like a person who had made peace with being tired. Around midday, we heard distant yelling behind us, then something else. A rising chorus of moans, not close yet, but spreading. Donna stopped, listening. They made noise, they're drawing them. Hank looked toward the sound. They'll get what they wanted. And then they'll lose it, Reggie added. We didn't celebrate, we just kept moving. By late afternoon, we reached the railroad spur. The tracks were rusty, ties uneven, but it formed a straight path through the landscape. In a world where roads were controlled, rails could be another way. We followed the tracks toward a low industrial area Jim remembered. An old aggregate yard and a cluster of storage buildings near a quarry access road. Not a town, not a neighborhood, but still something built for work. As the sun sank, we saw lights ahead, dim, steady, not like flashlights. Hank held up a hand, stopping us. People. We crouched beside the rail bed, watching. A small compound had formed around a metal-sided building, fencing, a gate, 2 vehicles parked near the entrance, a person on the roof with binoculars. Not infected. Organized survivors. Donna whispered, "This could be good, or it could be another toll gate." Jim said quietly, "Either way, we can't stay out here all night." He was right. The temperature was dropping fast. We were running on fear and caffeine that no longer existed. I looked at Hank, then Donna, then the others. We were a group because we'd been forced into it, because we kept getting shoved backward by circumstances and people with leverage. "Let's do this smart," I whispered. "We announce ourselves from a distance. No surprises, no rushing." Donna nodded, approving. Hank raised his radio, not the handheld, but a small battery-powered emergency unit Jim had grabbed from the barn before we fled. He clicked it on and transmitted on a common public channel. "This is a small group," he said, voice steady. "We're on the rail spur near your position. We're not looking for trouble. We're cold, low on food, and we'd like to talk." For a moment, nothing happened. Then a voice replied, calm and measured. "Hold where you are. One person step forward, hands visible. Everyone else stays back." Hank looked at me. "You started this convoy." I swallowed. "I'll go." I stepped onto the track bed and walked forward slowly, hands open, pistol still holstered. The compound's rooftop watcher tracked me. A gate opened slightly. A woman stepped out wearing a reflective vest over a heavy jacket, a rifle slung across her chest but not raised. She stopped 10 yards from me. "Name?" "Mason," I said. "Mason Rourke." She studied my face like she was weighing whether my eyes looked honest. "How many?" "6," I said. "2 vehicles earlier, but we lost the ability to keep them. We're on foot now." She nodded once, like that matched what she'd been seeing. "Any of you sick?" "No," I said quickly. "No symptoms. We've been careful." She glanced past me toward the tree line, where my group stayed low. "You armed?" "Yes," I answered. "We keep it controlled. We don't want to fight." She took a breath, then said, "We've got rules. You follow them, you can warm up and eat something small. You break them, you leave." I nodded. "We'll follow." She motioned. "Bring them in one at a time. Hands visible, no sudden moves." When I walked back to the group, relief hit like a wave. Not safety, not peace, but a door that wasn't slammed in our face. We approached the compound as instructed. They checked us, not aggressively, but thoroughly. They took note of weapons, asked names, asked what we could do. When I told them I could run generators and handle mechanical systems, their leader's eyes sharpened. "We've got a backup power unit that's acting up," she said. "If you can fix it, you'll earn your place." Earn your place. That was the new economy. Inside, the metal-sided building was warm from a wood stove. People sat on pallets and folding chairs. They looked tired, guarded but alive. A few kids huddled near a wall, eyes wide but not crying. Someone handed us cups of lukewarm soup that tasted like salt and gratitude. We rested, but we didn't relax. That night, as I sat near the stove, Hank leaned close. "Think we're done falling back?" I stared into the firebox, watching the wood glow. "No," I said. "I think falling back is the story now. The question is whether we fall back on purpose or we get pushed." Donna overheard and grunted. "We choose," she said, "or we lose." In the early hours of the morning, distant sound rolled over the hills. Not engines, not gunshots, but a shifting noise like a crowd moving through brush. The compound's rooftop watcher murmured into a radio. The leader, her name was Marisol Vega. Former National Guard logistics, she told us, came inside and spoke quietly to her people. I couldn't hear everything, but I heard one phrase clearly. "They're drifting this way." Not attacking, not hunting, drifting like weather. Marisol looked at us, at me, Hank, Donna, Reggie, Lena, Tyler, and Jim. "We can hold the fence for a while," she said, "but if they stack up against it, the noise, the pressure, it turns into a problem." Hank asked, "So, what's your plan?" Marisol didn't smile. "We fall back to the quarry cut. Higher ground, fewer access points. We've prepped it." A planned fallback. Donna nodded once like she respected that. "Good." Marisol pointed at me. "You're coming. We'll need power, lights, pumps. You can make that happen." And just like that, the word fallback wasn't defeat. It was strategy. We moved before sunrise, a controlled evacuation. Packs loaded, vehicles organized, people assigned positions. No screaming, no chaos. The compound emptied like a well-drilled crew, not because anyone was a soldier, but because they'd learned the hard way what panic costs. As we rolled out on a gravel service road toward the quarry cut, I looked back once at the metal building we'd barely started to think of as shelter. It shrank behind trees, swallowed by the gray morning. we were leaving again. But this time, we weren't running blind. We were moving with purpose, with a route, with a place ahead that had been chosen. Marisol's convoy crested a ridge, and the quarry opened before us. Steep rock walls, a gated access road, old equipment yards. A place that could be defended, at least for a while. We'd been forced to fall back all the way from northern New Jersey to here, step by step, losing ground each time the world pressed harder. Now we were learning something else. In this new America, survival wasn't about holding one perfect spot forever. It was about knowing when to let go, when to move, and how to make the next place stronger than the last. And as I climbed out of the truck and listened to the quiet echo off the quarry walls, I understood the truth that would shape everything after. The outbreak didn't just take cities, it took certainty. All we had left was motion, choices, and the people who kept moving with us.